My stepson said, "You're not my biological dad. You're nobody." I stopped paying his bills and forwarded everything to his father. His response was priceless. Subscribe to the channel and share your stories in the comments. And now let's get started. You're just a wallet. No one ever said it aloud, not at first. But silence has its own language. And over the years, I learned to translate every shrug, every rolled eye, every clipped answer into that one truth. That was who I was in that house, not father, not mentor, not even a man to be respected, just a provider, a faceless account number behind the life they took for granted. My name is Michael. I am 43 years old, a husband, at least by title, a stepfather, at least by circumstance. But in truth, I've lived a decade as a stranger in the home I built with my bare hands. When I married Laura, she came with two children, Josh, then just a boy on the edge of adolescence, and Emily, still a child who carried dolls into bed. Their father, Steve, lingered like a phantom at the edges of their lives. He lived nearby, a short drive away, but presence was never his currency. He showed up when it pleased him, a birthday dinner if he remembered, a soccer game if he wasn't hungover or busy chasing some fleeting romance, and yet he never had to earn their love. He walked through the door, and suddenly he was dad again. No questions, no resentment. I thought I understood in those early years. Children cling to blood, no matter how thin or poisoned it runs. I told myself time would prove the truth. That consistency would matter more than biology. That if I stood firm year after year, they would come to see me as something more than the man who signed checks. So I stood firm. I paid for everything. Their after-school activities, their braces, their birthday parties. When the Wi-Fi crashed, I was the one sitting on hold for hours until the signal returned. When the car battery died, I was out in the driveway with jumper cables, grease staining my hands while Josh stood inside, impatient for me to finish. When Emily's tablet shattered, it was me scrolling through repair shops at midnight, credit card in hand. Vacations? My savings. The house they lived in? My mortgage? The classes, the tutoring, the weekend getaways that gave them stories to tell their friends? All of it came from me. But affection? Affection belonged to Steve. He could vanish for 6 months and stroll in with nothing but a grin, and the children would rush him like a returning hero. Josh's eyes would light up. Emily would chatter with excitement. And me? I would sit at the table, invisible, while Laura watched with that strained, guilty smile that told me she noticed, but chose not to speak. That silence was its own betrayal, because Laura knew what I gave. She saw the bills, the late nights, the exhaustion in my body when I crawled into bed after working weekends to cover their needs. She saw it, but she never named it, never defended me, never demanded that her children treat me as anything more than the faceless man keeping the lights on. And slowly I began to understand. This wasn't just about Steve or the kids. It was about Laura too. She had grown comfortable with my sacrifices, the way one grows used to breathing air. She expected it. She leaned on it. And in her silence, she gave them permission to dismiss me. That's the cruelest part of stepfamilies, the constant comparison to a man who did nothing. I could sacrifice everything, and still, the measure of my worth would be Steve, a man who floated in and out like smoke, never staying long enough to choke, never staying long enough to be blamed. And I was permanent, present, tangible, which made me the one they could resent. It became a rhythm in the house, a quiet humiliation repeated day after day. When I gave advice, they looked to Laura for confirmation. When I asked for help, they waited until she echoed my words. My voice alone carried no authority. I was a substitute teacher in my own home, tolerated, never respected. I told myself patience was the answer, that one day they would look back and understand, that respect would grow from the soil of sacrifice if only I kept watering it. But the truth is, years passed, and the soil remained barren. Josh grew taller, his shoulders filling out, his tone sharpening with the arrogance of a boy on the edge of manhood. Emily became more withdrawn, speaking to me only when she needed something. Their childhood dependence faded, but gratitude never replaced it. I was a service to them, not a person. Sometimes at night, when the house was quiet and I lay beside Laura, I would wonder what would happen if I stopped. If one day the lights went dark, if the accounts ran dry, if the safety net disappeared, would they notice me then? Would they finally see the man beneath the money? Or would they simply curse me for not doing enough, for failing in the only role they ever allowed me? These were the thoughts I carried in silence. No one asked. No one cared to know. And so the years stacked up. 10 years of labor, 10 years of swallowing disrespect, 10 years of living in a house where my name was on the mortgage, but not on the children's lips when they spoke of family. Outsider, wallet, placeholder. That was who I was. And maybe if the lake trip had gone differently, I might have carried it longer. I might have stayed in that role, bitter but bound. But betrayal has a way of surfacing, sharp and undeniable. And when it came, it tore through the illusion I had built with one brutal truth. I had never been family to them, not in their eyes, not in their hearts. And once you see that truth, you cannot unsee it. It was supposed to be redemption. I told myself the lake trip would fix things, or at least smooth the jagged edges. A cabin by the water, secluded, quiet, filled with space for us to breathe as a family. I spent weeks planning it, combing through listings, comparing reviews, calling to ask about the quality of the trails and whether the dock was safe for swimming. I rented bikes, new enough to gleam in the sunlight, so that Josh and Emily could ride along the lakeside paths. I stocked the cabin pantry in advance, groceries delivered, snacks they loved, drinks they preferred. I told myself, this is the summer that changes everything. One last memory before Josh's senior year, before Emily vanished into her teenage world. A chance to stitch together what had always been frayed. The night before we were supposed to leave, I sat at the dining table, triple-checking the itinerary, maps laid out, confirmation emails pulled up on my phone. Laura was in the kitchen, humming softly as she folded laundry. The house was calm for once. I let myself believe, just for a moment, that maybe they would see what I was doing. Maybe they would recognize the effort. Then Josh walked in. Emily trailed behind him, her face unreadable. They stood there side by side, as though rehearsing something. My chest tightened before they even spoke. "Mom," Josh said, ignoring me, "we want Dad to come." At first, I didn't understand. I looked at Laura, then back at them. "What?" Josh crossed his arms, his chin lifting in defiance. "To the cabin. We want Dad to come with us." The silence that followed was brutal. I heard the words, but my mind refused to wrap around them. Steve, the man who drifted in and out of their lives like a shadow, who never paid for a damn thing, who never showed up unless it was convenient, he was the one they wanted. Not me, not the man who had built this trip from the ground up, but him. Laura's mouth opened, then closed again. She looked at me, her eyes wide, her lips pressed tight as though afraid to speak. I forced my voice steady. "This is our trip. I planned this for us, for this family." Josh's reply was sharp, cruel in its clarity. "He's our family. You're not." It was Emily who twisted the knife. Quiet, almost apologetic, but the words landed harder because of it. "It wouldn't be the same without Dad. It's a family trip. We want him there." I stared at them, struggling to breathe. My hands curled into fists on the table. All the months of planning, all the hours of work, all the money poured into making this trip possible, erased in a single sentence. Laura tried to intervene then, her voice brittle. "Josh, Emily, this isn't fair. Michael." But Josh cut her off. He turned to me, his eyes burning with something that was not just teenage defiance, but something colder, sharper. The line he spoke will never leave me. "You're not my biological dad. You're nobody. These are family decisions." Nobody. That word echoed through me like a gunshot in an empty room. I felt it tear through every sacrifice I had ever made. Every late night, every dollar spent, every moment I swallowed my pride in silence. All of it collapsed under the weight of that single truth they hurled at me. "You are nothing." I saw Laura's face pale. She looked at me, then at her son, as though realizing too late the depth of the wound. But she didn't speak fast enough. She didn't stop him. She let the words hang in the air, let them seep into me until they branded themselves on my bones. I didn't shout. I didn't argue. What could I say? You cannot reason with contempt that has hardened over years. You cannot beg for recognition from children who have already written you out of their story. So I sat there silent, staring at the boy I had raised, at the girl I had protected, at the woman who had allowed it all to fester. My chest was hollow, my vision blurred, but I forced myself to remain still. If I spoke, I would break. If I broke, they would see only weakness. Later that night, Laura tried to touch my shoulder in bed. I turned away. She whispered that Josh hadn't meant it, that Emily was just confused, that teenagers say cruel things they don't understand. But the truth had already crystallized. That was not a slip of the tongue. It was the unveiling of what they had always believed. I replayed the moment over and over as I stared at the ceiling in the dark. Josh's voice, cold and final. You're not my biological dad. You're nobody. Nobody. The word beat against me like waves against rock. And I realized as the hours dragged toward dawn that this trip was not going to save anything. It had already been lost. The trip, the years, the sacrifices, all meaningless in the face of that one truth. The next morning, I didn't pack the bikes into the truck. I didn't load the cooler. Instead, I sat at the kitchen table with my phone in my hand. My fingers hovered over the screen, trembling not from indecision but from the weight of what I was about to do. Because in that moment I understood, if I was nobody to them, then I would live as nobody. No more illusions, no more pretending. They had made the declaration, now it was time to act on it. Morning came like a judgment. I sat at the table before the sun had fully risen, the house silent except for the faint hum of the refrigerator. My phone lay in front of me, screen glowing with the banking app. I stared at the numbers, the accounts tied to Josh, the lifelines I had maintained for years without thanks, without acknowledgement. The words from the night before still echoed through my skull, seared into me like fire. You're not my biological dad. You're nobody. These are family decisions. Nobody. And if I was nobody, then why did my money carry the weight of fatherhood? Why did my labor hold up the life of a boy who spat in my face? I pressed my thumb to the screen. One by one, I cut the strings. Josh's car note, canceled. The gym membership, closed. The tutoring bills, forwarded. The allowance card, frozen. Each confirmation beeped back at me, cold and final, like a hammer striking nails into a coffin. And then I made the call. Steve's number was still in my phone. I had always kept it, though I rarely used it. He answered after the third ring, his voice groggy, irritated. What's this about? He muttered. I kept my words short. From now on, your son is your responsibility. His bills, his car, his memberships, everything tied to him is now yours. A pause, then a low chuckle, bitter, almost mocking. Handle it yourself, son. He hung up before I could reply. I stared at the phone in my hand, at the reflection of my own face in the dark screen. It was all there. Years of resentment, the fatigue of sacrifice, the hollow look of a man who had finally recognized the futility of his devotion. Laura noticed before anyone else. She came downstairs, hair unbrushed, a robe pulled tight around her shoulders. She saw me at the table, the phone, the untouched coffee. Michael, what are you doing up so early? I met her eyes. I shut it all down. She frowned. Shut what down? Josh's accounts, his car, his bills. From now on, his father will handle them. For a moment, she didn't understand. Then her face drained of color. You can't be serious. I've never been more serious. She gripped the edge of the counter. Michael, you can't do that. He's starting his senior year. He needs stability. You can't abandon him now. Her words cracked something in me. I rose from the chair, my voice low, sharp enough to cut. Don't you dare talk to me about abandonment. I have been here every single day for 10 years. Where has Steve been? Where was he when the braces needed paying? when the school trip came up, when the lights almost got cut. I've carried all of it. And what do I get in return? I get told I'm nobody, that these are family decisions and I have no place in them. Fine. If that's what they believe, then let them live it. Let Steve carry what he should have been carrying all along. Her lips trembled, but she didn't speak. Not at first. Then she whispered, "This isn't you. You're better than this." I almost laughed. "No, Laura, this is exactly me. This is the me you've been ignoring all these years. The man who broke his back to keep this family running while being treated like a stranger in his own home." The sound of footsteps interrupted us. Josh stumbled into the kitchen, hair a mess, his phone in his hand. His voice was sharp, panicked. "What the hell is this? My account's empty. My car payment bounced. What did you do?" I looked him dead in the eye. "I did exactly what you told me to do. Nothing. Because I'm nobody, remember?" His face went pale, then red. "You can't just cut me off. You've been paying this whole time. You can't stop now." "I can, and I did." Emily appeared next, clutching her own phone. "My card doesn't work. I tried to order supplies for school and it got declined." Her voice was softer, almost frightened, but I didn't waver. "Talk to your father." The room exploded then. Josh shouting, Emily on the verge of tears, Laura's voice rising above them, desperate, accusing. "You betrayed this family," she screamed. "After everything, after all the promises, you just walk away?" I turned on her, my voice steady, merciless. "No, Laura, I didn't betray anyone. I believed them. Your children told me what I was, nobody, and now I'm acting accordingly. If I'm not their father, then I have no responsibility to pay for them. That's Steve's role. Let him play it." Josh slammed his fist on the counter. "You're ruining my life." Emily's voice cracked. "Dad won't pay for us." "He never does." I felt the weight of their words, but I refused to carry it anymore. "Then maybe you should have thought of that before you spat in the face of the man who has carried you for a decade. Maybe you should have realized that blood doesn't pay bills. Respect does." The silence that followed was thick, broken only by Josh's ragged breathing. Laura whispered, "You're cruel." "No," I said. "I'm free." 3 months passed like a season of exile. The house, once filled with noise, became a theater of silence. Laura moved around me like a ghost, her voice clipped, her eyes sharp with judgment, but dulled with exhaustion. Emily kept her distance, her laughter muted, her presence reduced to a shadow slipping between school and her bedroom. Josh. He hardly looked at me at all. He had learned how to turn contempt into invisibility. But the consequences of my choice were everywhere, stamped into the daily rhythm of our lives. Josh's car sat unused in the driveway, weeds curling around its tires. His gym card no longer scanned at the door, and his tutoring sessions evaporated the moment the bills bounced. His anger burned hot in the beginning shouts, slammed doors, accusations that I had ruined his future. But fire consumes itself. Slowly, the rage collapsed into silence, and the silence into something else, a reluctant dependence on the father who never came through. Steve did not step up. That much became clear within weeks. He dodged calls, ignored emails, muttered excuses about bad timing or tight finances. When the bills reached him, he simply sent them back, a digital boomerang of responsibility. One text to Josh said it all. "Can't help. Figure it out." And so Josh began to feel the weight of the words he had thrown at me. Emily was different. She never shouted. She never declared me nobody. But she stood beside her brother that night, silent while he cut me down. Silence is its own weapon. Silence grants permission. Yet in the weeks after, I saw the cracks form. She lingered at the table longer than before, eyes lowered, guilt heavy on her shoulders. She began to pick up after herself without being asked, began to whisper, "Thanks," when I drove her somewhere. Small gestures, but they were not nothing. Then one night, I found a note slipped under my bedroom door. A folded piece of paper written in Emily's uneven handwriting. "I'm sorry. I know what you've done for us. I was wrong to stay quiet. Please don't hate me. I read it twice, then tucked it into my wallet. It wasn't absolution, but it was a beginning. Laura, though, was a harder battle. She had started therapy by then, at first for the kids, but the counselor had suggested individual sessions too. She came home quieter, her words more deliberate, as though she was finally forced to look at the years she had brushed aside. Still, she resisted. She told me I had gone too far, that I had punished children for being children. I listened, but I did not bend. Because children grow into adults who learn patterns from their parents. And if the pattern was that I would always swallow the disrespect, always pay regardless of how I was treated, then nothing would ever change. It was on a gray morning, months after the trip had shattered everything, that Josh finally cracked. He had been avoiding me, refusing to speak unless forced, his resentment a shield he carried everywhere. But that morning, as I sipped my coffee, he stood at the doorway, hands shoved into his pockets, eyes fixed on the floor. "Can you give me a ride to school?" he muttered. I stared at him. At the boy who had once called me nobody. At the son who had chosen blood over loyalty. His voice was flat, but there was something beneath it. Not gratitude, not warmth, but an acknowledgement of dependence. He had finally understood what his father would never give him. I set my cup down. "Get your bag." We drove in silence. No music, no conversation. But in that silence, I felt the faintest shift. Not reconciliation, not forgiveness, but the beginning of recognition. I realized something then, something I had been blind to for years. I would never again allow myself to be only a wallet. I would never again let love mean slavery, sacrifice without respect. Family is not blood. Family is not obligation. Family is respect, loyalty, presence. Without those, there is nothing but debt, a one-sided contract that drains the soul. Josh's words still haunted me, even as he sat in the passenger seat that morning. "You're not my biological dad. You're nobody." Maybe to him, I would always be nobody. Maybe Emily's note was the only apology I would ever receive. Maybe Laura's therapy would lead her back to me, or maybe it would simply make her see the cracks that could never be repaired. But I had drawn the line. I had made my stand. And for the first time in years, I felt the clarity of a man who had stopped lying to himself. As I pulled up to the school, Josh muttered a quiet, almost inaudible, "Thanks." He stepped out, shoulders slouched, eyes down, carrying the weight of his own choices. I watched him walk away, and for once I didn't feel anger. I felt something colder, sharper, but cleaner. Acceptance. They might never love me. They might never call me dad. But they would learn that respect has a cost, and I was no longer paying for their contempt. So now I ask you, was I wrong? Was I cruel to draw the line so late after so many years of silence? Or was it the only way left to show them that without respect, there is no family, only chains? Because here is the truth I will take to my grave. Blood is nothing. Respect is everything. And once you see that, you cannot go back.